Yes, Canada, it's true. The establishment media, well, I mean, other than the politicians, right? But how do you think you get the message and the information set out and put forth by the politicians? Well, it's through the establishment media in this country. Basically, in every modern democracy. So, let's be honest, Canada. It's the establishment media in our country that are the true enemies to truth and liberty. Why? Because they're the one that keep propagating the bullshit narratives and message and propaganda that keeps your mind indoctrinated and conformed in this bullshit ideology, this religion of statism. Need an example? Look no further. Mark Lavoie from the Globe and Mail. Headline: The NDP goes down the sound finance rabbit hole. Yeah, that's the headline. And this Mark Lavoie is a professor in the Department of Economics at the University of Ottawa. Think about that for a second. Think about it. Long and hard, actually. Not just for a second. Let that sink in real good. Economic ideas are like hares, as in rabbits. They go in circles, the Cambridge economist D.H. Robertson once noted. Stand in one place long enough and you will see dismissed beliefs come around again. Before 2008, the consensus among a majority of economists, the so-called new consensus, was that monetary policy was powerful enough to counter a slowdown or recession, that fiscal policy was unable to stabilize an economy, and hence that fiscal policy should content itself to balance budgets, run more efficient programs, and possibly reduce tax rates. Indeed, freshwater economists who believe, in contrast to saltwater economists, that the economy is always in equilibrium, were asserting that any increase in government expenditure would be fully compensated by a decrease in consumption, as households would save more to be able to pay for further future increase in taxes. Meanwhile, saltwater economists were claiming that an increase in the deficit would reduce the amount of loanable funds and so crowd out private investment. Thus, mainstream economists were saying that expansionary fiscal policy would have little or no positive effect on economic activity. This all changed with the 2008 financial crisis. The IMF has changed its tune, recognizing past errors. A vast majority of American and British economists now believe that expansionary fiscal policy, that is, autonomous increases in public budget deficits, does have substantial positive effects on the economy. The more so when these increases in deficits occur as a consequence of increased government expenditure or infrastructure or in a social transfer rather than as a result of tax cuts. Most recognize that monetary policy is powerless in the current circumstances, with nominal interest rates at or near zero, with some central bankers pretend to be useful by running QE programs. This brings us to the confusing debate on fiscal deficits between the leaders of the three major contending parties in an upcoming Canadian federal election. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals want to create an extra tax bracket for the rich, and they intend to increase government expenditure and the public deficit to counter the present economic slowdown or recession. Thomas Mulcair and the New Democrats say they will not increase tax rates on personal income, and they vowed to keep their first federal budget in balance. Stephen Harper and the Conservatives promise more tax reduction and a balanced budget. The NDP stand is nothing new. Back in September 2008, former leader Jack Layton happened to be in front of me at the security gate at the Ottawa airport, and I told him that to preempt a huge recession, he should ask for a stimulus program and argue in favor of a large federal deficit. Mr. Layton responded that provincial NDP governments had run 8 balanced or surplus budgets in a row, and told me that if I held such crank ideas, I ought to start my own political party. I didn't have to do such a thing because just 2 months later, the NDP, along with the Liberals and the Bloc, all demanded the implementation of a fiscal stimulus package, which the Conservatives stubbornly refused to design until late January 2009, when the IMF recommended such a policy. Many of my more, get this, Many of my more Keynesian colleagues are puzzled as to why the NDP is taking such a stance about balanced budgets, as Mr. Mulcair is apparently more concerned with sound finance than with functional finance. The latter doctrine says that a public deficit in itself is neither good nor bad. What matters is to procure sufficient stimulus to counterbalance the loss of aggregate demand coming from the private sector. As Richard Koo, the famous Japanese financial advisor, had explained in his book, The Holy Grail of Macroeconomics, if firms do not invest their profits while households are saving their incomes or deleveraging, someone else has to spend. Oh, Maynard Keynes has been such a destructive force in the modern world. Many of my brother-in-laws and my spouse has 6 sisters, are also puzzled by the current debate among political parties. They used to tell me that an NDP government would carelessly try to spend its way out of a recession while the Liberals and the Conservatives would craft balanced budgets. Somehow, when right-wing parties run deficits, nobody in the banking industry or in the mainstream media seem to care, whereas it is an anathema when a left-leaning party does such a thing. When Ronald Reagan pursued his supply-side economics program in the 1980s, reducing tax rates, creating huge budget deficits, and inadvertently becoming the U.S. president to have pursued the most Keynesian fiscal program, public deficits were off the radar. But as soon as Bill Clinton and Barack Obama came to power, fiscal deficits and debt ceilings became the talk of the day. The well-known Polish economist Michael Kalecki wrote that the social function of the doctrine of sound finance is to make the level of employment dependent on the state of confidence. Sound finance, like a free trade agreement, is just another trick in the hands of powerful vested interests to gain more traction in society. It is regrettable that Mr. Mulcair feels that he has to abide by it in order to get elected. Now listen to this. A sound fiscal position is not crucial to economic growth and job creation over the long term, in contrast to what the newly adopted Federal Balanced Budget Act is claiming. Countries such as Botswana, Iran, Estonia, and North Korea have public debt ratios that are much lower than Canada, but I doubt many Canadians would like to live there. Okay, so I covered that entire article, and think about the kind of shit that was put forth in there. I mean, basically this whole article, it can be broken down into what this this author is trying to suggest. Of course, he's trying to function with all kinds of contradictions rolling around in his mind, right? Just listen to the way this thing was written. This is someone that's trying to say 2 + 2 = 5 and trying to find the most intelligent way to say that, right? But in reality, it's just coming across, for someone like myself that understands genuine economics, not fucking voodoo economics, not Keynesian economics, not centrally planned economics, but real world economics. Just like nature. When I talk about real world economics, it's like talking about, it's basically like taking nature into account and accepting the fact that nature is nature. Sure, you might try to centrally plan and manipulate, and you might have some small-term success in certain segments or at certain times or periods or eras, but nature is going to happen. The universe will keep expanding. Stars will continue to be the centers of solar systems. Universe or galaxies are galaxies. You can't centrally plan or manipulate reality. As much as these idiots might want to try, and like I said, and I've said this prior, when you're talking about John Maynard Keynes, Keynesian economist, he even had to admit when called out by genuine free market, the people that understand real economics, macroeconomics, not political economics, when he was called to task, and people like Hayek pointed out to him the failure of his economic models and his central planning models, well, what was his response? We're all going to be dead someday anyways, right? This is the mindset of these fucks. Let's just see if we can get away with it as long as we can. And it doesn't matter if the backlash comes and if there's, devastation or pain. Well, it won't be us that'll have to suffer it. Let the other ones figure it out, right? Let the younger generations, let them figure that shit out. We don't give a fuck. Hey, if they're willing to go along, if we could propagate our central planning message and initiatives and force them or trick them into believing it, let's do it as long as we can. And when the gig's up, hey, we gave it our best try, right? I mean, where's the empathy? Where's the compassion? Where's the economics? Where's the reason? Where's the logic? It's all absent when you're talking about Keynesianism, central planning, collectivism, forced subjugation. I mean, even in this modern world where you're talking about the NDP, like the socialists, which are the ones that are talking about being fiscally prudent and responsible, I mean, you must know, I mean, it sounds good in theory, and I would love to believe that would be the case, but it's just another preacher or salesperson standing in front of you at the pulpit or on stage, hoping that you'll buy into what they're selling. The reality will not bear out to be even closely aligned to the rhetoric, but they're hoping you will believe them long enough, just long enough to give them that power. And then they've got, well, as with most, especially if they get a majority government, well, they'll have 5 years at least to do whatever they want, and you'll have no say after that. You get to do your one little check on which political leader, which master, which ruler, which collective gang is going to take control of this particular geographical landmass. But once you've done that, once that one time every 4, 5, whatever years it takes, other than that, that's the only say that you will ever have in how your life is manipulated, controlled, dictated, how your wealth is plundered, confiscated, or depleted. And they're hoping that you'll still, come on, just give us that power. Give us that power. And I recognize many will. But I also recognize many, many, many more are waking up and saying, I'm not giving none of you fucks the illusion or the delusion or the belief that you have power over me. I'm telling you right here and now, I'm not going to no voting box. I don't need to pick masters or rulers. I reject rulers and masters completely. Come on, Canada. I want the rest of you to get on board. You know it's the right thing to do. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.